These apologists of the Akufo Addo government have failed to tell the Ghanaian people is the fact that COVID-19 brought the biggest financial windfall that have ever accrued to a sitting government in the history of Ghana. And that our dear country would not have been plunged into this economic mess if these resources were judiciously and prudently utilized by our duty bearers. Sadly, after squandering all these resources on some very unconscionable ventures, as we have demonstrated to you, these callous nation wreckers have turned around not only to blame COVID-19, which fattened their pockets, but are now seeking to expropriate the life savings and hard-earned monies of the Ghanaian people in the name of a so-called debt exchange program.
The press follows the recent report of the Auditor General on a special audit conducted by his office into the COVID-19 expenditures of the Akufo Addo government for the period March 2020 to June 2022. He stated that behind that morbid fear of accountability was an attempt to conceal from the Ghanaian people what some of them have always known to be stinking rot, high-profile corruption, naked thievery, and the misuse of COVID-19 funds by the government. The report, he noted, nonetheless reveals jaw-dropping details of how various officials and assigns of the government misapplied resources for the management of COVID-19 pandemic. 15 key highlights he hence outlined, of which key among them is:
The Auditor General's report details how the Ministry of Health paid a total of $120 million to UNICEF for the supply of COVID-19 vaccines, but only received vaccines valued at $38.3 million, with a whopping $81.8 million of this transaction unaccounted for. This, ladies and gentlemen, raises serious concerns given the history of the current Minister of Health, Addo, under whose watch Ghana entered into the dubious Sputnik V vaccine contract and paid a colossal amount of money for vaccines which were never supplied to us as a country. It will be recalled how the government of Ghana, led by Addo, the Minister of Health, chose to pay $19 per dosage of Sputnik V vaccine through a phony middleman called Sheikh Ahmed Dalmouk Al Maktoum of the United Arab Emirates, when Ghana could have easily procured these vaccines at $10 per dose or less. Fellow countrymen and women, we in the NDC are very concerned that despite the dire economic crisis confronting the nation, the Akufo Addo government has neglected and or failed to retrieve the outstanding amount of $81.8 million, which could have been channeled into other developmental ventures to ameliorate the plight of suffering Ghanaians.
What is more bizarre is the payment of allowances to staff of Ministry of Information.
It has also emerged that at the height of the pandemic, when frontline health workers complained about the lack of adequate PPEs, with some even losing their lives, senior management and supporting staff of the Ministry of Information were busy paying themselves a total amount of 151,000 Ghana cedis as COVID-19 risk allowance without approval. One may ask, what risk did Kojo Nkrumah and these staff of the Ministry of Information face to warrant the sharing of such colossal amount of money among themselves as risk allowance? You here, media men, you attended many Meet the Press series organized by Kojo Nkrumah in the Ministry of Information. When you went there, were you tested for COVID? Or were you treated for COVID? To have warranted the payment of COVID risk allowances to Kojo Nkrumah and his staff. What is even more bizarre is the finding of the Auditor General that allowances totaling 811,800 Ghana cedis were paid. That is some 8.1 billion OCDs were paid to staff of the Information Ministry without adequate supporting documents. The Auditor General noted that apart from expenditure memos and sign sheets, there were no activity or program reports to support and authenticate these allowances.
In view of this, he seconded that it is within the right of labor that trade unions, pensioners, among others, stand against the debts exchange.
In the face of this unpardonable and despicable raid on the public purse, there can be no justification whatsoever for the Akufo Addo Bawumia government to attempt to indirectly impose a draconian debt exchange program on the Ghanaian people in order to clean a mess they and their cronies in government created. It is therefore within the right of labor, pensioners, trade unions, individual bondholders, banks, and other stakeholders to stand firmly as they are doing now against the brazen attempt to foist and impose unfavorable terms of a so-called debt exchange program on them.